One of the things we always do as administrators are start out with machines, and we make these bizarre statements in meetings where we say we've got plenty of disk space. We're not going to run out of disk space. Next thing you know, a few weeks later, you're running out of disk space and you're looking for everything you can find. So in this video, we're going to jump into this managing the virtual hard disk and talk about compacting the virtual hard disk. Now, compacting will actually reclaim unused space in the virtual hard disk. And the main benefit there is going to be to reduce the amount of space the virtual hard disk occupies on the host drive. Now, to compact the virtual hard disk, there are some things you need to be aware of. First of all, your virtual machine must be powered off. Not going to be a problem. A lot of your things will be grayed out when you try to get out there and do some of these things if you're not powered off. Your virtual hard disk cannot be mapped or mounted. So watch for that. If it's mapped or mounted, you're going to have to unmap it, unmount it to be able to compact it. And you also cannot compact it if the space on the virtual disk was pre-allocated. I'll talk about pre-allocated in just a few minutes. If the virtual hard disk is an independent disk, it must be in persistent mode. Now, I would strongly recommend that when you talk about, start thinking about building and creating these virtual machines, I touched on some of this way back at the beginning of the course. Go out there and read in VMware's documentation about independent disks, pre-allocated disks, whether it's a sparse disk, whether it's a single file, all this sort of stuff. You do have this little matrix of options that you can choose on your disks. Generally, pre-allocated limits you tremendously. You can't defragment a virtual hard disk that was pre-allocated. You can't compact it. There's just a lot of things that you can't do, and so they tend to be not the best idea. So let's talk about this pre-allocated aspect of this. What is a pre-allocated disk? Well, this is an option that you chose when the virtual disk was created, and there were two options available to you. You could either have a pre-allocated disk, and this meant that your virtual disk size and space that you reserved when you created the virtual machine matches the size of the virtual disk, or the space being used for the virtual disk. Here we go in English. If I'm creating a new virtual machine and I tell it that I want it to be a pre-allocated disk and this thing's going to be 40 gigabytes in size, it's going to go out there to the host drive and it's going to block off a 40 gig size space on that disk, and that is all for the virtual hard disk. And it's going to be 40 gigabytes from the get-go, regardless if it only actually needs about 3 gigabytes of space, it's still going to set aside and hold 40. If you choose the sparse option, then the virtual disk is going to be equal to whatever size it needs to actually store the guest operating system and then any data that you add to it. And you can tell it that it's 40 gigs, but it's sparse, and it will automatically grow up to 40 gigs. But it'll never be 40 gigs until it actually has to store 40 gigabytes worth of space. Now, this also allows you to go back later and defragment and compact and do some other things. So compacting the virtual hard disk is going to be limited or wide open based on how you set this thing up and some of your options. Now, to compact a virtual hard disk, we're going to go to the virtual machine menu choice out in Workstation. We're going to choose Settings, and on the Hardware tab, we're going to select the actual virtual hard disk, and then we're going to go to Utilities and choose to compact it. And compacting will then occur. It could take quite a while depending on the size of your disk. Then you're just going to click OK when you're done. So let's jump out into Workstation, and I want to show you a couple of things here. So here we are in Workstation, and on my XP Professional machine, I want to show you here that if I go to the virtual menu item here, the virtual machine menu item, I should say, in Workstation, I'm going to click on this, go to Settings, and then you'll notice I can choose my hard disk. Now, over on the right side, it's going to show me my disk file that's in use right now. It's also going to show me my current size, which is 95.4 megabytes, and the maximum size is going to be 25 gigabytes. So 23.8 gigabytes have not been used. Now notice I'm getting some information here. The disk space was not pre-allocated for this hard disk. That's the good news. The hard disk contents are being stored in a single file. That's okay, and in some cases it's not okay, but don't worry about it right now. But then notice in the utilities we do have some of the virtual disk manager functionalities exposed to us here. Notice we can defragment, we can expand, and we can compact these VMDK files from right here within the system. Now to do some of the other more advanced stuff, to change different aspects of the hard drive, it's going to be easier and better to use the virtual hard disk manager. Some of those are here. For example, in advanced I can change to independent, persistent, non-persistent, but some of these settings are going to require the machine to be powered off, some that can be powered on, and all that. But I wanted you to see this because these utilities in here, and again for some reason we get used to this layout over here in VMware and we don't notice these buttons. So make it a habit when you're in here looking for things to make sure you pay attention to the buttons over here on the right side, okay? But that is how we're going to set some of our virtual hard disk settings. And then notice if we were going to compact, we would choose this. It compacted the virtual disk. That one didn't take very long because I don't have much there. And then it says it was compacted, and there we go. So anyway, that's kind of the skinny on compacting the virtual hard disk.